Hello everyone, my name is Alvaro Saburido and today we're gonna do things a little bit different. I want to present you to someone. This is Mas. He's a full stack developer at Renault Industry. And this is his boss, Douglas. He just got a GC business deal with a software company to use their monolithic tech stack to do their websites. Mas is condemned to use this tech stack for the next 3 years. He spends most of his time trying to make it work. He would love to use a modern stack, go headless, but he's stuck with this one. Mas is frustrated and losing motivation. This sounds a little bit too familiar, right? Any resemblance with the real-life experience is just purely coincidental. Today, we're gonna help Mas how to create a modern static generated portfolio. But why a static generated portfolio? In my opinion, it's one of the best side projects that a developer can do to learn a new stack. Also will allow Mas to use his favorite tools, which are like Nuxt and Vite. Mas also will learn how to use a headless content management system, in this case a Storyblok. Mas will learn how to create static site generated pages, which are the best option for his content in his portfolio. Maybe Mas get enough knowledge to convince his bosses to use this technology instead of the monolithic one. Or he can just use it as a fancy curriculum and open the door to new job opportunities. A funny anecdote is that I actually got my job in Porsche Digital because one of the directors saw my portfolio and he said that the creativeness of my portfolio convinced him to hire me. So you never know if your portfolio can open new job opportunities. So what we are going to do today? We are going to create a Nuxt project using Vite. Also, we are going to set up everything to be able to create a new space in Storyblok, connect it to our Nuxt application using the official SDK. Also, we are going to create some blok or components. We're gonna get into that later. We're gonna fetch the content from a Storyblok and render it in our page. We're gonna use the rich text feature to show the content in a single project page. And also we're gonna see how we can generate it and deploy it to Netlify. Before we continue, I'm gonna show you what we're gonna build today. So this is a Mas portfolio, okay? And we're gonna create a front page that is going to have a hero component with content coming from a Storyblok, and then we're going to click to portfolio where we can see some of the projects that Mas has been working on, like the internet and this one here. Then we're going to click in one of them and we're going to see a little bit of content on how they created the internet. All of this is completely static and you can check the performance to see what I mean. Now let's talk about the tools that we're going to use today to create a static generated portfolio. The first one is Nuxt 3, which is one of my favorite frameworks in the front-end ecosystem. Why? Because basically it allows you to create a static site generated pages, server-side rendering apps, and SPAs using Vue 3, composition API, and most important, is powered by Vite. So we can summarize everything in just this sentence, that Nuxt 3 is all about the developer experience. You can check the docs here on the link in the slide. So how can we get started? Let's create a new project. So you just need to open a terminal and write down npx nuxt init and the name of your project. Or you can use pnpm, which is gonna use dlx nuxt init and the name of your portfolio. In this case, because we are helping our friend Mas, we are going to use Mas portfolio. After we create the project, it's going to prompt something like this on your terminal. So you can open it in your IDE of choice. In this case, I'm going to use VS Code, and remember to install with the package manager that you like the most. In my case, I'm going to use pnpm install. Remember when you are using pnpm to add the tag shamelessly hoist. This is the basic structure of a new Nuxt project, okay? It's really minimal, and what I did here is I created several stuff for our portfolio. we're going to use a structure that is based on layouts and pages, okay? So one of the cool things about Nuxt is that everything is out-imported. So whenever you create one of these folders, like here, you create the layouts and we create the default one, or the pages for the homepage, like the index.view. Everything is going to be out-imported. The same for components, and when we create the composables folder, it's also going to be out-imported. So really basic layouts is ideal to extract common UIs or code patterns between your application to use it as a reusable layouts. Then you have the pages which contain all your routes. Okay, so every time you create something in the directory pages, it's going to create a route for your application. And then you have the components, which is basically your view components. Okay. So we are going to see the main structure here. I create a component that is a toolbar, and I'm not going to talk about the styling here. I'm using Uno CSS, basically similar to Tailwind. And most important is the app.view. If you want to use layout, you need to use Nuxt layout as a wrapper, and then another component that comes by default from Nuxt, which is the Nuxt page. This is going to handle all the routing. And in our default layout, we are going to add the toolbar because it's something that we are going to use in all pages. So instead of adding in each one of the routes, we create it in an upper level. And we pass a slot that is going to be the route. Okay? So now let's talk about the Storyblok. Storyblok is one of my favorite tools ever because it allows me to create a headless CMS solution that is really easy and enjoyable for developers and marketers to use. I use it in my portfolio, so basically it brings all the magic and all the developer experience from Nuxt into a content management system. You're gonna see it, it's amazing. So here are the docs if you want to start with the Storyblok. In this case, I already have an account, okay? So you just need to register, have an account, and you're gonna have a dashboard like this one. And you can, we will need to create a new space for our new project, right? So you sync it up, and then when you're logging, you can create a new space. It will give you the option of using example one. Let's create a blank one. Also, we will need something to be able to connect our Storyblok with our Nuxt application. So there is an official SDK from the Storyblok team that works pretty fine. So I'm gonna add it using pnpm, add it with the package manager that you like, and it's gonna be add Storyblok Nuxt. Okay, I'm gonna save it as a development package. And when it's already installed, you can go to your Nuxt config ts, and you basically add it as a module. You will need to add in an environment file. Okay, this is the best option for it because it's the most secure one. So you create an environment with the Storyblok API token that you can get in the settings in your dashboard. So this is gonna give you the connection or the key to authenticate to every request that you're gonna do. Also, in the options, make sure you use API client as true. Okay. Something important before I continue. The reason we are using environment variables is that we are gonna add them into a file that is not gonna be pushed to the repository, but actually when we deploy to Netlify, we're gonna add it in the system. So never share this token if you don't want to get hacked. Before we start creating content in a Storyblok, let's set up the visual editor, which is in my opinion one of the best features that this content management system have. If you navigate to settings in the side menu and go in one of the tabs for configuration called visual editor, you're gonna see a field that is called location, which defines the local environment that you're gonna use. In this field, we're gonna write down the one from the Nuxt server, which is localhost and the port 3000. It's important to put a slash at the very end. Okay, so basically this is gonna connect to your local instance, your server, when you run Nuxt dev. Since version 2, this local server needs to be run with HTTPS, which is the same as HTTP but secure. To do that, we're lucky enough that Nuxt version 3 already has a flag for it and native support. So you can enable it by just changing a little bit the script for dev and adding a flag of HTTPS. If you want, you can also create a certificate and use it locally. Let's add our first page into Storyblok. So the way to do that is navigate to the content section on the sidebar menu, and inside of it you're gonna find an interface that allows you to create, modify, and delete all of the content in your Storyblok instance. This is gonna help us to create new pages, which are a type of content. If you want to create a new page, you can do it by the button that is in the top right of the interface, which says Create New. When you click it, it's gonna prompt a model that is going to ask you for the name, etc. It's really important that we make sure that we set the content type to page. If we open that home page, it's gonna open in the visual editor. For now, it's gonna prompt a 404 because we haven't created the route in Nuxt yet. We need to tweak something first, because if you check the URL, it's gonna be the localhost 3k/home, but we don't want that. We want only the slash to be the main one. So we can change that by changing the real path that is available on the top menu. There is a button that opens the entry configuration model. On it, at the very end, you're gonna find a field that is called real path. We're gonna set this to only the slash to be the main one. This is going to match how Nuxt creates the home route. Click save, and voila, you're gonna have your page rendering right away. Now let's talk about blocks. Imagine that your website is just like a Lego set, something like this. So you have your head, your body, all the components that are building this. You can think of each component like a Lego piece or a Lego block, okay? So each one of these has a separate color, separate stuff, and when you put it together, you have your website. So think of blocks in a Storyblok just as individual pieces for your stories. You can add, remove, or rearrange them to create your own website. How do we create a block in Storyblok? You can navigate in the sidebar menu to the block library. This will contain all the blocks available in your space. As you can see, there are some that are already created, and one of them is actually page, which is a content type. We're gonna build a hero component, and we are gonna name it hero. So you can click on the create new. Another model is going to be open as usual, and then you can choose if you want to have a nestable block or convert it into a type. So in this case, we are going to use nestable block because we want to be able to put it between other components. Then let's add the fields. Something that I really like about the Storyblok is that whenever you are creating, it will take you then to edit the hero component and add the fields. So here we can add which fields are going to be contained on our hero component. Normally we select a title, we put an image, and we put some text. So that's the most basic hero component that you can have. If you see right here, there is like a small badge that has an AV, okay? Here you can select the type of field that you want to add. If you click it, it's gonna be open a model or a tooltip with all the current available types. You can add another blocks, you can add text, for example, for the title. You can have a text area for the text, or even rich text, which is something that we're gonna use. As you have numbers, markdown, you can create a drop-down, you can add assets. For example, for the media image, we're gonna use an asset to be able to upload images, and so on. So now that we have created our first block, let's add it to a page. So we're gonna navigate into our home page in the visual editor, and you're gonna notice on the right side in the side menu that you're gonna have something that says page and below body. And there is gonna be a plus button below the page field. So there you can add or insert a new block. In the list, you're gonna search for the hero component that we just created. Once you click it, it's gonna add it to the page. Then we can edit the fields that are inside of the hero component by just clicking and then adding a fancy title and a fancy text. What about the image? So something really cool about the Storyblok version 2 is that it comes with an amazing asset manager. It has a built-in editor, so you can edit your images and you can add everything there. The alt text, the copyright, the data, all the metadata you need for that image, it can be added in this interface. So we're going to upload this image from Pixel Moss and we are going to add it to our hero. Okay? Remember, always put in the alt text for accessibility support. But now that you click Save Everywhere, you're probably wondering, like, how do we render this? Because you're going to see in the visual editor, nothing is there. And it makes sense because we haven't created our components in Nuxt. So the way of doing it is quite straightforward. Storyblok has some implementation that if you create a directory called Storyblok and you place components inside, it's going to treat them as the blocks that you define on the Storyblok instance. So they are going to be discovered automatically. I love the word, like automatically. Okay, and for now we only need one for the page content type and one for our hero. You're going to see why in a moment. Because we're using Nuxt, it has a hook to auto-import all the components, so you don't need to import them anywhere. We're going to create the first one, that is the root. Okay, this is going to be page.view. Here is the HTML that we need to use. So this is the component responsible of rendering the page content and all the blocks that are inside. If you remember well, when we were creating a new block, there was one block called page. So this is going to be the same one. We will use a default component that comes with the SDK that is called a Storyblok component. Think of it as a fancy way of using component or dynamic components, but with everything ready to go for a Storyblok. Okay? And also this directive here that would allow you to automatically sync your instance with the Storyblok changes in the visual editor. Also notice that we're passing a prop core block. And between that block, we are going to iterate the body, remember the body from the visual editor, and we are going to insert each one of the blocks available. So if we add a hero component, we're going to get the page and the hero component between. Then let's create the hero component. It's going to be pretty similar to the previous one because we are going to define again a block, which is an object, as a prop, and then we're going to create some layout for it. In this case, I'm creating a grid that will have an image from one side and the content in the right side. Okay, we're going to access the block title and block text, exactly the same fields that we created on the interface. We had to mention something here, is that the media comes as an object. So if you were thinking about using media directly in the source, it's going to fail because it's an object. And you can see it here in the JSON that a Storyblok is returning. So if you check the media, it's going to have an ID, an alt, a file name, the copyright, the field type, etc. Okay, so it is an object. The same for URLs. When you add a field that is the type link, it's going to have a similar structure. So now that we implement our first blocks for the components, let's go to the part of fetching the data. What I mean by fetching. So if we go here, this is the JSON that is returning with the SDK. So if we ask for the story of home, we are going to receive this structure, which has the story of the page of the name home, then the content, the body, and inside of the body, we're going to see that this structure here is the hero. So this is going to give us all the information that we need in order to create our page. So in order to do that, we need to fetch it from the Storyblok instance. We're going to create a composable. So this is a basic composable. I'm using TypeScript for it, so that's why it has a type. And we need to create it in the folder of composables, so they are out-imported by Nuxt. Then a good trick that I use is that normally here when I get, I'm fetching the story using async Storyblok, which is a composable that comes with the SDK. I'm gonna pass the ID, which is home, okay? But you Later we will use it, for example, if we're gonna get the portfolio, we want to get another one. And in the story configuration, you can define which version do you want. In this case, for development, I normally put draft because it's the one that is not published yet. But in production, I use publish. So this is a nice way if you have an environment and you put process environment here as a variable and you use a ternary operation, you can define that it uses draft when development and publish it when it's in production. For now, let's use only draft. So we go back to our home page and we actually use that composable. So we are gonna call use stories, get the story, and we're gonna pass home. That way, in a asynchronous way, we're gonna get the story, and this story is gonna be the one that we are gonna pass the content to the Storyblok component. Now we need to add it to our homepage. So we're gonna call an instance of use stories, and we're gonna get the method that we're gonna use, which is get story, and we are gonna use an await operator to do an asynchronous call for the story home, and we're gonna get it in a variable called story. So here, if we check the JSON response, here, we're gonna see that we have a story, which is has the name of home, and inside of the content here, if we reduce, we're gonna see that we have a component called page. This is the one that we created under the folder of Storyblok. And inside of it, it has another body, and here is the hero component that we're gonna use in the first page. So this is the structure that Storyblok returns in their API. That's why we have a Storyblok component here, because we are gonna pass a story.content is the one that contains the page, and then the page is gonna be able to render all the blocks inside. Ta-da! And we have our hero component just render on the home page. Now let's take a break for a couple of seconds, because what we are gonna do right now is awesome. And I present you to my cat. He likes to join me while I'm recording. So enough about that. Let's go to how we are gonna create a portfolio, if my cat allows me. So here we're gonna create, following the blocks structure, we're gonna have a page such as the home page, but it's gonna be the portfolio page. And this page is gonna contain several blocks that each one is gonna be a project. So it could be a card, for example, a list of a card. We're gonna have our header, okay, similar to the home page, but instead of a hero, we're gonna have all the projects listed, okay. And if we click in one of them, we're gonna go to a portfolio / and the slug of that project. In this case, I click a project 2 and it's going to a single page of the project 2 with all the content available there. And here is where we are going to use the rich text editor. So how do we create a new portfolio folder? We go again to our dashboard, and when it says content in the sidebar, we navigate to it. And now we're going to see like the one that we created before, the home page. But instead of creating a story, like we did before, we are gonna create a folder, okay? This folder is gonna be called portfolio, and we are gonna set it to parent folder root. Content type is okay by now, we can put none, but normally you, here you restrict which kind of content type do you want inside, okay? For now, let's keep it like that, create, and now we go to this part. So we create between that folder, we create a new portfolio page. This is a plain story, okay? What is different though is that we need to check the define as root for the folder. So that means that the root portfolio will have this page as the root page. Also, we are gonna define the content type as page, similar of what we did with the home. So now let's create our first project. Between the same folder, we're gonna again click on create new, and this time, instead of using the content type of page, we're gonna create a new one. So you could do that before. There is, in the block library, we could have created there a new type of content type, which is gonna be a project, but Storyblok gives you the opportunity that if you haven't created it yet, you can created right now. So the name of the content type, when we check add new, we're gonna call it project. Okay, this will allow us to create all the different projects between this folder. If we click create, we are gonna be prompted with a modal that says edit the project. And this will allow us to add fields to this project in a similar fashion of what we did with the hero component. So what does the project need? Well, we already have the name, so we don't need to add a new title, okay? But we could add the media or the thumbnail that we want to present. As an asset, we are gonna create an excerpt. Excerpt is normally used when you have the main page to have a description text, really short one, that tells you what the project is about before you enter the actual page. And then you will have the content one. So another way that you can access this is in the sidebar. There is a blok library. So you could be doing it from there, but since we're following the flow of the Storyblok, the UX is gonna prompt you into here. So before I continue, it's important that the content you select rich text, okay? Now let's fill all the project fields. So I'm gonna put an image for the thumbnail, an excerpt with some random text, and some content. For now, I'm not putting anything fancy on the content. As well as we did with the hero component, now we need to apply the changes on our Nuxt applications to be able to see the new portfolio page and also the projects. So to do that, we're gonna use dynamic routes in Nuxt. I put the documentation here, but I'm gonna explain it real fast. So we create a folder that is called portfolio, and inside of it, we're gonna create an index.view that is gonna be the main root of that folder. Similar of how we create the structure on a Storyblok. And for the projects themselves, they're gonna be portfolio and the slug string for that project. For those of you that doesn't know what slug is, it's just basically a normalized string with the same name as the title. It could be the same name or anything that you did, but it needs to have a certain format, so no break. For example, it doesn't have spaces, it has like underscores, so things like that. Here in the slug, the dynamic routes allows you to create like a parameter. So if you name this file .view with square brackets and a slug, is gonna know that you are gonna pass the slug as a parameter and be able to use it inside. Although it's a lot of magic, okay? Here we have the portfolio page. So this is what we're gonna put inside of the index or portfolio.index, right? And here we are going to use the same way that we did in home. We're gonna use story and pass portfolio instead of home. It's a little bit different because here I'm putting a header with the story name, so it's gonna say portfolio in the top. And then we have a section where we are gonna put our project list. Notice the difference between this one and the homepage. The homepage is using a Storyblok component directly, but this one is not. Because we are gonna fetch everything in the portfolio using a composable function. This composable function is gonna be similar to the one that we were using before with a few changes. So we're gonna fetch all the projects from a Storyblok, meaning all the stories that are between that folder. We need to create a composable called use portfolio under the composable directory. Then we're gonna use the API. So the way we're gonna use it is, we call it here, use Storyblok API, which is a composable that comes with the SDK. And then we're gonna pass this configuration here. This is the part that is saying if it's the draft version of the published version, then it needs to start with portfolio. So this is saying to Storyblok, hey, give me the ones that are in the directory of portfolio, okay? And we're gonna exclude the home page of the portfolio, meaning the start page or the one that we define it as a root. Because if you don't, you're gonna get all the projects and also the main root, okay? Sorry about that. We created a state that is a reactive with a property that is an array of the projects, and When we had our data, we are just passing to the state projects data stores. Okay, we're gonna return the state as refs, and for now I didn't put the other function that we're gonna use, so ignore this one, but we are gonna send back the fetch projects. With the composable that we just created for the portfolio, we are going to fetch the projects in a synchronous way on the portfolio.index. So the idea will be to use the composable here, use portfolio, and take the state, which is the projects, and fetch projects. So first of all, we're gonna call this method that is gonna fetch them, and then we're gonna have projects reactively updating on the template. Also, I'm gonna use Nuxt link. So Nuxt link is similar to root link from the view router. It's basically a global component that would allow you to create links really easy with Nuxt, okay? And you only need to pass like where it needs to go, so to here, and we're gonna pass portfolio and the project as well, okay? Inside, I'm also using Nuxt image. Nuxt image is in a similar fashion another component, but it doesn't come by default. You need to install a module for it. And what it does is that all the struggles that you have normally with images, like different sizes, sources, and stuff, it makes it really easy to do it. And also it has this crazy good format attribute or property that allows you to put actually the extension that you want to use. And also I think they have an option for providers, so you can put the clouding area there. This is pretty cool. And we are gonna, this is like the card, okay? Here. If we go back to here, we have this section, and the project list is gonna be this. So we're going to iterate in the projects, and each one is gonna be a card. You can see here the background, the shadow is what is doing the UX of the UI of the card. Okay. So once we save it, we are gonna have this on our visual editor. So we're gonna have the page with portfolio title, okay, and also we're gonna have our first card with the link to the actual single page. Okay. Now. But it looks really simple because there is only one project. Let's create another. So we're gonna add the second project, but in a different way. Something cool about the interface of the visual editor is that it also allows you to browse the content on the sidebar in the left part. And you can see all the pages that are between the folder that your main page is, which in this case, we're in the folder of portfolio, and we have the project that we just created. And we have like a plus button on the top. If we click it, we're gonna have the same model as we were in the content section, and adding a new story. So here we're gonna create another one. It's gonna be the intranet, and you can see that this log is automatically created from the name. Also, we are gonna set the type to project. In this time, we don't need to create a new one because it's already existing. So now that we have another one, let's talk about the single page of the portfolio. Let's talk about the project single page. If you remember correctly, we create one with square brackets and a slug. So we need to add a function inside of it that actually fetch the story based on the slug. And we get that slug from the route. So this part here is going to automatically set a parameter for that route with the name of a slug. And whatever you pass as the root, like projects, the internet, that string is going to be the slug. So we're going to pass it to this project by slug. It's a method that we add to the composable. Okay, it's pretty similar to the another one, just with the difference that you're going to filter by slugs. And filter by slug is meaning that you put this wildcard here to match with the first part of the full slug, and then you add the slug, which is gonna be the string that you wanna pass here. Okay, in this case, it's the internet, for example, so it's gonna filter by it. Since it's filtering, it's gonna return an array, so you make sure you get the first one of the one that is in the 0 position, and you return. Here we have a similar thing. We have a Nuxt image for the thumbnail in big. And for now, let's just put the title. Okay? What about the rich text editing? So remember we added the content as a rich text. In order to render it, because it's not gonna be plain string, it's gonna be more like an HTML structure, we need to use function that comes, or a method that comes with the SDK called render rich text. In this case, we set a computed property that automatically updates whenever the story content change. In this case, because we name it in the same way, that was my error, we can put it like a different thing, but it's gonna be a story content. And then we need to use bhtml to get the resolver rich text. And we add the class of prose. Prose, well, I don't know if it's pronounced correctly, but prose is a utility class that auto-formats typography if you're using Uno CSS. It's gonna put all the styles for the H1, H2s, P tags, and so on. In this part, you can see the visual editor, and on the right side, this is the rich text editor. And here I'm setting everything, like a headlines, images, a list. And you can see on the left side, this is what is prompted from that utility that we were using. It's prompting all the HTML elements corresponding to what we set here. So that way we can have rich content on our editor and translatable or rendering in our page. Okay, let's jump now to the last part of this presentation, which is going to be how to deploy it and use with the static site generation. So I know that front-end development is full of fancy acronyms, and one of those are SSD, because it's a kind of a rendering mode that allows you to pre-render everything on build time. Okay, so this is if you understand more or less how server-side rendering and client-side rendering works, is that normally you have your client, you make a request to the server, and the server returns an HTML, a JavaScript, and a CSS, right? So for client-side rendering, the browser is the one that is responsible to do everything. With the server-side rendering, the HTML is already rendering the server and sent to the client, and then Vue runs a reiteration on the browser, and that's where you have interactivity in your components. How a static site generation works is just that instead of having a web server, whenever you build in the pipelines, okay, you build your Nuxt application, it will pre-render at build phase. It will create a static HTML for each one of the roads that you choose to, and you can have them, for example, in the CDN, or you can have it in Edify. For example, on any static hosting that you decide, if you're using Amazon Web Services, you can put them in a S3 bucket, for example. And then that's what is gonna go for the client. I'm gonna quickly show you how you can do it with Nuxt. So here in our package.json, we have several scripts. One is the build. So this one is gonna generate a server-side rendering for your application. The dev is gonna do the same, okay? Unless you put in Nuxt config ts server-side render as false, but we don't want that. So there is a script called Nuxt generate that is responsible of pre-render all the routes that you enter here. And in this case, we are going to use nr, or you can use pnpm, whatever you're using, run and generate, okay? So it's gonna say, okay, this right now I'm using the release candidate 12, which is most likely to be stable until now for the last release. And here you can see that initialize the pre-rendering, and it's pre-rendering for initial routes with the crawler. So this works like Nuxt has a crawler, and when you're building, it will also take the content that you're going to display, because we don't have anything inside of the repo whatsoever that indicates that we're going to have a page called the internet, another one. So this is the magic about that. It's actually doing the request with the Storyblok SDK, and it knows that it's going to create a portfolio, the internet portfolio, how you train, etc., with the crawler. So it's gonna check all the routes that are generated, and then it's gonna create an HTML per each. So we can actually check that if we go here to this folder. In this case, it's gonna be output public. So an output public, you're gonna see here that inside portfolio, it generates each one of the HTML class. And here you can see the HTML of each one of the pages. In this case, this one is the internet, and inside of it, you can see that it has all the content, all the HTML that is in that page. Okay, now that we know what SSE is and how we can do it with Nuxt, let's create a TOM file, it's TOML, to deploy to Netlify. So we need to run the previous command, and just this week, if you're using PNPM, Netlify announced proper support for it, so no more hacks needed. And we can create it in this way. So it's gonna be this syntax, okay? And in the build command, we're gonna set to generate. So it knows that it needs to generate it in SSG. And also the redirects for the index HTML file, okay? I put a link here with the documentation on how to deploy a GitHub repository into Netlify. So the way that you can create a new site from GitHub is that you go to your dashboard in Netlify and you click here, add new site, and you can do it by import an existing project. You connect to your GitHub, okay, and it's going to fetch all your different repositories, and you just look for the one that you want to deploy, which is in this case is gonna be the portfolio from us here. I'm not gonna click it because I already created, okay? But if you click it, it's going to tell you like what is the build command and so on. And well, maybe I can do it. Yeah. So it's gonna tell you what branch to deploy, and the build command is taken in from the configuration file that we created, and the directory is this. Here you might think why it's not output public, but in this case with the Netlify with Nitro, which is the server engine that it goes from Nuxt, is gonna know that it's this. Believe me, you just need to use that. Okay. When it's created, you're gonna see that it's going to render the first time. This was the first time I did it. So now let's summarize everything that we learned in this talk. So now Moss had the opportunity to learn about Nuxt Tree and Storyblok and how to use it together using the SDK to create a static site portfolio. Moss now can easily add new projects into the Storyblok dashboard and just have it rendered on his page. Moss is truly happy now. So if you follow me until this point, congratulations, because you have your new portfolio. Now, next steps. Some of the things that we can do for now on is try to optimize the image sizes, take advantage of using Nuxt image component to render the specific size in every viewport. This is important to not load more than you need to use. Then you can create a blok section with a similar structure on how you create a portfolio. So you will create a main one called blog. You can have your folder there, and inside create a content type of article and start doing your posts. Maybe you can add categories into those projects and articles and be able to then create some filters and filter the content depending on the category selected. Something that I did for my own portfolio was I created a contact form with Netlify forms and just share it with the world. Make sure that everyone knows what you did. I put everything that we mentioned on the talk. There is a link for the repo available for the Moss portfolio code on GitHub. And the only thing that is not included is the part of a Storyblok, so you will need to create that in a part of the repository. I also put the documentation for Nuxt Tree and the SDK for a Storyblok in case you need to check something. I also have extended version of this talk available as a playlist on YouTube, where we create a sushi app recipe app using a Storyblok and Nuxt. So if you want to go more in detail and step by step a step-by-step tutorial, I would recommend you to check it out. And there is a really nice tutorial on the Storyblok page about using Nuxt. I also recommend you to check it out. Last but not least, my name is Alvaro Saburido. I'm a front-end tech lead at Porsche Digital. I live in Barcelona, but I'm originally from Venezuela. I'm also Storyblok ambassador. I work creating content with them. I often write in depth too. You can check my articles there, or you can check my portfolio directly. I create a lot of content, especially Nuxt, Vue, Beat, 3D content on my YouTube channel, which is Alvaro Dev Labs. So make sure you subscribe there. You can check my own implementation of the portfolio on alvarosaburido.dev. And if you have any questions, any feedback about this talk, or you just want to chat, feel free to DM me or mention me in a tweet. My tweet handle is right there, it's Alvaro Sabu, so I hope to see you there. And it has been an absolute pleasure to be here today with you. Thanks for the organizers to give me the opportunity to give this talk, and also for you to attend it, and I hope to see you soon. Let me know, share with me your portfolios. I will be more than happy to share them on my social media. Happy coding!